He's incredible with his insights, and whoever is out there needs to follow John Nosta. So here we are on this leadership live stream. Let me make sure everything is going okay. We are live. We've got people joining in. And let me start off with Dr. Shafi. Dr. Shafi, we are amidst COVID-19. We're understanding this new reality. Help us understand where you are. What are you dealing with right now? And what's your analysis of the situation?
Thanks, Ian, for the invitation to join both Naveen and John Nosta, of course. As a big question to ask at the outset, so much is going on. So I think the headline news is that COVID-19 will change and transform the way that we deliver healthcare, not for today, but the future. The world is in a different place now. We're seeing innovation. We're seeing fast-track new ideas coming to market and to illustrate how healthcare might improve. What I'm seeing actually is interest where obviously it's concern. COVID-19 is a pandemic, a lot of anxiety and sadness amongst the world with a lot of deaths. But at the same time, we're seeing a positive nature where the community is coming together, not just healthcare, entrepreneurs, innovators, big tech companies coming together to see how we can overcome some of the burdens of this disease. So what I'm seeing at the moment is this kind of community spirit. So I want to be positive here. Although it's depressing news, of course, I think this is going to be what John and I always call an inflection point for humanity, where healthcare will ultimately transform to be better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Shafi. I'm going to ask you a few more questions about what you've been doing with respect to locally with the NHS, setting up hospitals. I read a lot of news about you almost every day. So we'll talk about that in a few seconds. Naveen, let me go over to you. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, the transformation that's happening in the world generally because of COVID-19, and where we are right now.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is when you're in the midst of a storm, it's very hard to see anything beyond what you're seeing in the immediate storm. And I think, there's no way to minimize the impact of COVID-19. But just remember, this is 1 in 100-year infectious disease that essentially we will overcome. And there's just no doubt in my mind that within the next 12 to 18 months, we will have a vaccine, we'll have a cure, and this will be it's just a passing moment in the history of humanity. And what we really need to, as humanity, we have conquered infectious diseases. When you go back and look at all the infectious diseases, millions of people used to die. It used to be 20-30% of the humanity used to disappear, last time when we had these infectious diseases like Spanish flu or the plague. Right. So I really think more or less we as humans have taken a great control of infectious diseases. And what we really have is an epidemic of chronic diseases. And I'm not trying to minimize the number of people who have in fact lost their lives due to COVID-19. But the fact is, every single year, we lose millions of people from cancers, millions of people from heart diseases, millions of people from diabetes and autoimmune diseases, Alzheimer and Parkinson, and all these chronic diseases. To me, the greatest epidemic of humanity is the chronic diseases. And I am spending the next decade of my life to essentially understand exactly why do we have these chronic diseases, because we are not born with them, and there is absolutely no reason we can prevent and reverse these chronic diseases. So I started this company called Viome. And the idea is for us to be able to understand every single gene that's expressed in a human body at a biochemical level and use as a food as medicine to be able to prevent and reverse chronic diseases. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, in the next decade, we as humanity would overcome this problem of epidemic diseases. There will never be a time 10 years from now when we will be looking back and saying, we know someone who died because they had a chronic disease. And I think we'll have a complete control of our infectious diseases as well, because once we understand that we can build our immune system, and immune system, a lot of it is controlled through our gut. And once we can get a gut imbalance, you'll be able to get the immune system and build the immunity against infectious diseases, whether it's the flu or whether it happens to be COVID-19 or any other infectious diseases. And once we can modulate our immune system, and I really believe many of the infectious diseases and chronic diseases will actually disappear. So I'm very optimistic about the future of healthcare And I believe the future of healthcare is where every single one of us is a CEO of our own health. And health is going to be democratized, health is going to be consumerized, and health is going to essentially, to some extent, become a part of everyday life.
Thank you, Naveen. You've painted such a nice futuristic and hopeful picture that seriously, it's made my day. That we're definitely looking forward to a better, 10 years onwards, or 5 or 10 or 15 years onwards, and the future of healthcare. Everybody wants to live longer. Everybody wants to have a great quality of life. So we'll come back to that, and we'll talk about Viome and what exactly is Viome and this new methodology. John, I want to go to you last but not least. You are you're a big voice in digital health, digital transformation, and you're one of the leading voices worldwide. Help us understand that. Is COVID-19 digital transformation on steroids? Is it a good thing for healthcare, actually?
Well, let's kind of take a breath here and try to understand what's going on in the world first and foremost. So Naveen said something very interesting, a passing moment in human history, that COVID will be defined as a passing moment in human history. I tend to agree that I do not think it's a defining moment, but more of a bit of a catalyst. I'm amazed at the number of people who are now experts in Spanish flu, that they know that there were not only one peak, that there were in fact 3 peaks, that early retreat of mitigation resulted in an emergent epidemic. Yet 2 months ago, no one knew anything about the Spanish flu except epidemiologists. So this is what I find very interesting, that I do believe that COVID-19 is significant, but I think it's significant because it acts as a shove, as a nudge, as a push off of a tipping point where we've already been. And simply put, the inflection point is a great way to capture this. But for me, it's a triple inflection point. And I think that's why it's not so much about COVID, but the path we take in the future. And the first is that we have the technology now, and that's very interesting to me. The technology is here. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't have the bandwidth, we didn't have the memory, we didn't have the technology to help drive these innovations. We didn't have the data science in many instances. So that's number one. Number two, we have the whole idea of governments, of regulatory bodies acting in the favor of technology. They recognize that it's important, and they're going to loosen restrictions. For example, the use of telemedicine across state line. So that's number two. Number three is the moral and social imperative. And this is really the final driver. It's the right thing to do. Telemedicine was an option. Today, telemedicine has emerged as a clinical imperative. So it's those three things that are coming together to push technology as an essential partner. And for me, that's exciting. So Naveen, I agree with you. 10 years from now, they'll say, do you remember that COVID? It was the COVID-19. That's what it is. That's my hope. That's my expectation, that I don't think this is a pandemic defining the future, but something that is pushing the future in a new way. And so that's real interesting to me. It's not the end of the world. It is the beginning of a new and exciting time in human history.
Thank you, John. I thank you so much, everybody, for, first of all, being part of this panel, sharing your expertise. We've got attendees right now tuned in from India, from Kazakhstan, from different places. I want to give a big shout out to all the attendees who are and viewers who are watching this live stream. Thank you for joining and being part of this. You can ask questions by posting in the comment section, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Put your questions in the comments, and we will ask them to the panelists. Now, I want to start talking about where we are today. Now, if we draw a line between right now and say yesterday and before, and in the past, we've had big challenges when it comes to transforming industry, accelerating the pace of development of new treatments, new cures. Have we been really slow in doing this? And is COVID-19 becoming an accelerant now for us to move faster? Look at how fast things are moving right now. What is happening? Is this a revolution? Who wants to take that question?
Sure.
First of all, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, sure. So I think there's two things. We're all assuming this COVID-19 is going to accelerate. It's kind of what we're seeing today because the need for patients is great. Whether we do 3D printing of PPE, whether we're going to accelerate vaccines as fast as possible by crowdsourcing the information, whether we're creating ventilators en masse, for example, we're seeing the need for moving as fast as possible. So regulations have changed, as John alluded to already. So things seem, there's less bureaucracy currently because of the drastic requirement for improvement to save lives. The question for me really is going forward, will we fall back to our usual slow-paced innovation cycle that we have? Or are we going to reset that balance, reset the clock? Because actually, no, we're not going backwards, we're going forwards, but from a different point. There'll still be some bureaucracy, still be some hurdles to overcome, but I think that the world will be in a different place. John mentioned telemedicine, and let's take that as an example very quickly. The telemedicine has been there for about 10, 15 years. We've all been using it for some virtual consults, etc. in the past, but with little traction. Not many people using it properly, and there's a lot of interest. Now we've seen an explosion in telemedicine. For example, each company now is doing 4,000 or 5,000% of the work it was doing before. It's offering free service because it's completely inundated with work. And so will we go back to normal? No, my own hospital, the Royal London now, is doing telephone triage and virtual consults. Going forward, we've seen this is a huge benefit. We won't go back to face-to-face. It's reset, redesigned. It's almost retransformed where we're starting from. As John has said earlier, this is a new kind of experience for all of us. So the next 10 years, there's a new starting point for all of us. That's kind of thing where we are. Naveen.
I want to take a step further here. I really think we are living in a most innovative decade in the human history, period. There are going to be more changes coming in the next 10 years than we have ever seen in the life cycle of humanity. And the reason is, this is the first time there is a confluence of exponential technology that's making it possible. And I think John alluded to some of the stuff, which is, the sequencing. The cost of sequencing a gene expression or even genes is coming down so fast. It used to be hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and today you can do that for under $100, right? Now, the fact is, for the first time, if you were simply relying on the gene sequencing, which is DNA, you would have never found the virus, because this is an RNA virus. That means understanding the RNA virus, you have to be able to do the RNA sequencing. And that, to me, that's the key. Now, for the first time, the humanity has all the technology at its disposal, and each individual and a small group of companies are now capable of doing things that only the Fortune 500 companies or the superpowers could do before. A guy in a garage can go power up and today can sequence the COVID-19 to be able to go out there and get amazing computing power at AWS, to be able to use a massive amount of AI to be able to find out how to build the immunity against this, and to be able to do the thing that would have never been possible. And that means every single one of us can now go out there and change the trajectory of how humanity is going to live. And that, to me, is the biggest thing. Every one of us can go out and be part of the solution, rather than constantly bitching about it and saying, why can't someone do something about it? You can be the solution, saying, what can I do about it? And go out there and essentially be a solution.
Thank you, Naveen. I love the open and forthcoming way that you're talking to us. And that's exactly why we're here. John, you were nodding your head.
Well, once the toothpaste, the technology toothpaste is out of the tube, it's very hard to get back in. So for me, what was startling is that people realized how easy it is to do a telemedicine visit. So when that happened, that was like, gee, this is pushing me over the proverbial threshold. So that's number one that I think that is fascinating to me. Number two, which is really interesting, is that we're at a point where, while your opinion matters, and I know this is really a controversial thing, it's more about the data. And we're seeing now that you can show me that X or Y might be working, but if I don't see the data, that I have no real way to understand the practical application, whether it's remdesivir, whether it's hydroxychloroquine, whether it's even, very, very restrictive social distancing. We don't really know that it works Actually, we don't know how it works. Is it a threshold phenomenon? Is it social distancing at home and in subways? So for me, the big tool here is that data has emerged as truly the new currency. Now, as we look forward, I want you to look back for a second, because it's great to have new ideas. It's great to have telemedicine. But I think one of the big issues here is the functional diffusion of innovation into the system. But simply put, people have to unlearn. It's not only learning, they have to get out of this rut. And I would put physicians and healthcare providers in that rut in many ways, because they're used to doing certain things a traditional way. And maybe that's drug development. So for me, we have to unlearn.
John, luckily we have Dr. Shafi here. He's a practicing medical practitioner. He's a surgeon. He's out there doing what he does best. Is it so easy, Dr. Shafi, to unlearn? I mean, traditional doctors are learning for 8, 10, 12 years before they specialize. How easy is this unlearning process?
That's a really interesting question, and one that I've pondered on for many, many years over my lifetime. So you're right, medicine, sadly, doctors, healthcare professionals are stuck with what I call dogma and tradition. It's kind of who we are. Yeah. We're risk averse generally as healthcare professionals, as doctors. We don't take chances. Obviously, there's a reason for that about patient care, but the problem is we have incremental changes, which aren't great for us. So the problem we have now is the mindset, as Naveen said, should be more exponential, should be different. So how do we change the mindset of every healthcare individual to be exponential? That's a huge problem, huge nut to crack. So obviously there's a few people, I guess like myself and others, who want to innovate, who want to push the boundaries. The vast majority are stuck. I think the COVID-19 will help them understand that we need to move on and transform our minds, certainly. But if you think about even education, for example, education has really changed with COVID-19. We see online education now taking off. People on Zoom, on different platforms now like this, educating themselves. So that will change. So I'll give you an example of what I've been trying to do. So surgical teaching. So I'm a surgeon. I've been teaching for many years to my students here and abroad. It's very much done in a fashion where you have a small amount of people in the operating theatre or the OR, if you're in the US, for example, and you teach some skills to a small amount of people. But actually, that's not good learning. It's a terrible environment to learn and teach because everyone's around the patient. There's no room to see anything. So when I use the Google Glass and virtual reality kinds of training, it was taking that to the next level, using technology to show, look, we can scale. We can use technology and share the knowledge on a global scale. So they call me the virtual surgeon, Ian, for one reason or the other, because I've been looking at how we use virtual consults, holoportation, looking at holograms, avatars, these digital interfaces to share knowledge. And what we're seeing now is that's coming to in being at the moment. The real problem, of course, is how do you persuade people, change their mindsets? That's education. That's digital transformation. That's changing the framework for them.
But
different incentives.
But Shafi, we're still talking very incremental stuff. You're talking about, instead of talking to doctor face to face, you talk to them on a video camera. You're still thinking very incremental changes here. And that to me is a problem, that when a most, forward-thinking doctor is thinking the biggest change that has happened is now you can talk to a person in front of a camera instead of face to face. That's the problem. The problem that we're really seeing is the innovation is moving so fast. The research and the data is coming so fast. The human mind cannot process and read that much information, what's being generated every 24 hours. That means that fundamentally we have to rethink how the healthcare is going to be delivered. It has to be driven through artificial intelligence. That means the AI has to become a part and parcel of how a medicine is practiced. You can no longer say it is a man versus the machine. It is the man and a machine working together, and the data being analyzed constantly through the artificial intelligence, providing the information to the doctor so they can essentially use it. And that to me is going to be the key, is there is a 20-year gap between what happens in the lab and what you see actually in the practice. And that has to change, because the doctors now are forced to realize that they don't know things. That means they are now doing that things, the phase 3 trial directly rather than going through phase 1, phase 2. And that is a regulatory part. But I really believe that even when you go to a medical school, no one is taught about nutrition. So basically, a doctor with a great, heart and a good meaning doctor, what they are taught is, you give me the ill, I'll give you the pill. And for all practical purposes, they become the salespeople for a pharma company. And all they're doing is simply prescribing the pharma drugs without even looking at it and saying, hey, let me understand what might be causing that autoimmune disease. Instead, they say, let's just suppress the damn immune system because you got this problem. Let's suppress the symptom, and that's all we got right now. Every single time we are simply, when it comes to chronic diseases, we're simply suppressing the symptom rather than trying to understand what is causing the disease and look at the cure. And as a cynic, I might even say that whole healthcare system is designed to keep people sick, because everyone in the medical, if you look at the industrial medical system, everyone makes money when you're sick, and no one makes money when you're not sick. So they have an incentive to keep you essentially with a chronic disease, and chronic disease means a lifetime subscriber, right? And that to me is a problem when the pharma companies knows that suppressing the symptom, you have a lifetime subscriber, curing a patient has a one-time cure, and that they don't want that. And that's the problem that we need to solve. And that's why you need entrepreneurs who say, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go fix the problem because I don't have a baggage of that drug that I need to sell.
John, you see things. Go ahead, Dr. Shafi. Go ahead.
I agree with you absolutely. So we are, I think, all similar in this kind of exponential change. We want to change that world for the better. The problem we have is that discourse. We are those kind of changes. We understand what's required, but the system itself is unable to change, Naveen. That's the real problem. So yes, we can push hard, and we should be pushing hard, redesigning, reimagining healthcare. The problem, of course, is 99% of the people and the systems aren't fit for purpose. And that's a difficult problem at the moment to crack. They had to change ultimately as the technologies come in, as there's new experiences and new ideas come to fruition, and it's at pace. So my view is that unless people do change, they'll be left far behind, and they'll become almost archaic fairly quickly in their outlook. John, I
want to add on that, John. You look at things from a broad perspective. You're looking at pharmaceutical industry, healthcare, digital health. You're looking at a broad spectrum of things within the healthcare. How do you answer Naveen on what he's just been saying?
I would punch him. I think
do it.
I just smack him. I think that there's no verbal articulation of the response. I think he's right and I think he's wrong. I mean, look, you can take this conspiratorial construct that pharma only perpetuates a disease as a profit margin, and you can carry that down the road. You could also talk about the evolution of humanity and say that the very carbon-based life form is obsolete. So maybe we should just work on robots and taking our consciousness and pushing it up to the cloud. So, I think that the heroes of the next 10 years will be the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not as pessimistic as I used to be. And again, I was rather pessimistic. But I think that the opportunity to transform clinical care, and just looking at areas around, let's say, immuno-oncology as a way of leveraging your body to treat itself in various conditions is very exciting to me. So we're no longer giving metabolic poisons, cytotoxic chemicals. We're actually helping the body treat itself. So I remain optimistic about the pharmaceutical community. And again, everybody is Shafi, you know better than anybody. If I give you a new antibiotic, if I tell you it's a cephalosporin with a better safety profile or expanded spectrum of coverage, you'll write for it the next day because you have confidence. But if I tell you it's a mumbo jumbo that's based on some kind of DNA profiling that kills the bacteria, you'd be very reluctant. So, the tragedy is that physicians want the same but better. And,
Naveen, I want to ask you.
Naveen wants completely different.
What I'm really What I'm really trying to say is that there is a time and a place, and I'm not suggesting that people have bad intention or bad motive. It is they are not taught to be essentially looking at what is coming down, and they wait until it has gone through the system for 20 years. And I really think what changed the industry, in every industry, forget for healthcare for a second, is the consumerization. When you starting to see the latest cutting edge stuff coming out in the lab, and the consumer now has access to that information, consumer starts to ask the doctor, hey, doc, what does this really mean, right? So for example, at Viome, we are able to do at-home testing. We are able to look at every gene that's expressed in your blood, every gene that's expressed in your gut. That means every single microbiome, what they are producing. Yeah. And then we are able to simply say, looking at all these things that are going on, here are the things, the foods that you should eat and why, and here are the foods you should avoid and why. And it's not about, hey, are these food healthy or unhealthy? They're unhealthy or healthy based on what is going on inside you right now. So for example, for me, it says don't eat broccoli and don't eat cabbage and don't eat Brussels sprout. And they were all simply because my gut microbiomes were producing tremendous amount of sulfide that was causing inflammation in my gut. So we can say if the food that contains high sulfate is going to be bad for you, right? And my point is same type of thing. I was eating a lot of protein, and I was having a massive amount of protein fermentation in my gut, causing ammonia, and that was essentially causing inflammation. I could not digest spinach because my oxalate pathways in my gut was not very active. So my point was, simply by changing the diet, what we're seeing is there is a tremendous amount of impact people have. And the problem we have had in the past is there has never been a data-driven approach to food. And the doctors, for that matter, has always said the food is not a medicine, even though we knew 2,500 years ago when Hippocrates said. So every doctor takes a Hippocratic oath, except they forget what Hippocrates said, which says all diseases begin in the gut. One man's food is another man's poison. Let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. And we forgot that medicine is a food.
Well, while they're saying that food is medicine, they're also swearing to the god Apollo in that oath, and I don't subscribe to the god Apollo for my theology. Now, hold on, wait a second. Let me finish here. The magic of Viome, the magic of Viome is not consumer centricity. It's science. Yes. It's science, right? Yes. You are, and there's a big difference, because I think that having a product or company that's consumer infused is very important. But I think this silliness that we put the patient at the center of all we do is wrong. I think from a pharmaceutical perspective, we put science at the center of what we do. So that's why I kind of, everybody wants to be Apple, everybody wants to be Amazon. But funny, I don't think they can play in that arena. So it's a very interesting mix, Naveen.
So John, I agree with you. Science is the center. But who uses that science, and how do you get science in front of the person who actually needs it? That is where the key is. So we are driven 100% by science, right? So we look at actually what genes are expressed, what metabolites are being produced, and exactly what to do with that. And not just in the gut. We also look at your blood. We look at, oral microbiome. We digitize the human body. And once you can digitize the human body, you can now look at the stuff and seeing if these are the biochemical activities, how do you manipulate them using bioactive compound, which may come from food, they may come from supplement, or they can come from drugs. But the point is, no longer it is a myth. It is a science. So I do agree with you. But I think, John, what you're going to find, and I challenge you, that in the next decade, you're going to see, just like anything else, the consumer is becoming smarter and smarter, and they're driving the healthcare experts in their direction. So if you go back to your genetic report and you go to a doctor, a primary care physician, and say, doc, I got this gene expression, tell me what to do about it. They look at you, first of all, they're saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even know what the hell the gene is. And by the way, the next reaction is, this is all bullshit because I don't know about it. I'm not going to make myself look bad. Right.
I'll give you that point, but I think that the consumer is not going to be smarter. I think the consumer will be empowered, and technology will be smarter.
That's fair. That is absolutely fair. So
Dr.
science
Shafi,
and
Dr. Shafi, is the consumer, is the patient at the center of what you do right now? Dr. Shafi, I want your comment on this.
That was a really good question. Obviously, fascinating to hear both Naveen's and John's views. And I guess, from our perspective, we try to put the patient at the center of our conversation. We try to have a holistic approach to medicine. And a holistic approach is something that's very commonplace, particularly in cancer, what that I do. I'm a cancer specialist. So breaking bad news, managing the patient through life, end of life, for example, it's very much a experience of the whole person. There are lots of people involved. We have multidisciplinary team meetings. We have a lot of specialists together, nurses, clinicians, working on the best premise of that care and using the science, as Naveen has mentioned. I think that going forward, it won't be just about that conversation. It is about this personalized care. If we use the science in that sense, we get the profiling, we get the data around their bodily functions, we have more physiology, we have more data-driven healthcare, then I think there's a combination of both. There's a holistic approach about life in general, about how you feel, how you interact with your families, how the illness affects you in your work, etc., all that kind of thing, as well as the personalization, which is data-driven. So I think we're moving into an area, it's going to be very sophisticated, no question. I think very directed to individuals. I'm hoping the next 10 years, by 2030, we'll see this kind of personalized healthcare being rolled out. We'll see much more data being available. We'll be seeing people wearing sensors, wearables. We'll see remote care. As Naveen said quite rightly, chronic disease would manage much better. Well, back on the very first conversation that Naveen was saying, is that about living forever. I don't think people want to live forever. I think people, if you take a person, say, look, here's 70 years of your life, but you're going to be healthy and you have a good life, rather than living to 120. They'll take it. I'll take it any single time. Right? I did a whole thing. I did a presentation around this. And I think that living forever isn't the goal at the moment. It's maintain healthcare for as long as possible, to have all your faculties together, all your physiology working. That's kind of where we're getting towards, maintaining wellness, maintaining health, and having this data-driven healthcare the next 10 years.
So data is, of course, becoming a pivotal thing when it comes to different industries, of course, with healthcare as well. My question is that, are we really able to gather data as we would like? I know, Naveen, you're trying to do that with Viome, digitize the body, get the data from an individual. But when it comes to the healthcare system, this is my personal opinion, I think we're really slow in getting data together, extracting data from patients out there in the field. And look at the COVID-19 crisis right now. Everybody's just struggling to control it. If we had the data, I don't think we would have been in such a big fix. What is your opinion? John, I want to ask you, because you're the master of digital health. Where are we in America, in Canada, in the UK, in the modern world, if you will, with respect to actually knowing our patients, knowing the data, and being able to capture it, whether we have technology or not? What's your analysis on that?
Well, let me just jump back really quickly to spark the argument a little bit more with you guys. The notion of patient centricity really just makes me crazy. I kind of think that humans are antiquated modalities largely. And how many, Shafi, don't answer it, but I'm going to ask the question, okay, but don't answer it. How many social scientists does St. Bart's have? How many social scientists, psychologists work at Novartis? Zero, right? So I think that the focus is on technology as the center. That's what we do. That's where we get so smart. Then of course we have to connect it to our humanity. But putting humans at the center is a very intellectually easy argument that makes us feel good. And I don't want to feel good. I don't want to feel smart. That's number one. So where we are in terms of data, I think that we are at a bit of an impasse. As we talked earlier, we need something to push us over that hurdle. And I think that data in healthcare has been basically used, and Shafi, I'd love to hear your comment on this, as a tool for revenue. That's really what data is. Data is billing and coding. And unless we can bill and code, nothing happens. It's all mediated through things like Epic and Cerner and these large organizations. So for me, I think that priority around optimizing care is what is the single biggest impediment to why data is not as integral to our wellness in life.
So, John, let me tell you that I agree with you that science will always be at the center of the healthcare revolution. But the only difference is the science that we have today is being interpreted by a middleman. And the middleman, let's just call them that healthcare system, right? And my point is that part is going to change because now that science is going to be available in an easy to understand form to each patient who actually is suffering. And I think Dr. Shafi will absolutely tell you, when a person has a disease, they become expert at that thing. And many times they go to a doctor, they have more research about that subject than doctor would ever know. Just sometimes they look at the stuff and say, when did that happen? Right? My point is, so the science is at the center, but I think the availability of science in an easy to understand form is what is really changing. And then using the AI to be able to say what is relevant to me, what applies to me. And then I think the other part that I slightly disagree, the data today is all about billing and stuff. But I think when it comes to data to understand your human body, for example, it's a very good, look at immunotherapy. Today, we can now look at exactly the DNA of the cancer. And I think now we are starting to understand it's not just the DNA because it's not homogeneous. It is very heterogeneous. That means you have to look at all the genes that are being expressed, including the microbes that are in that environment, the tumor environment, and to be able to understand exactly how that ecosystem is working and to be able to disrupt that ecosystem is all going to be data-driven. And that is where I think the data is going to be the key. And it's not just about personalization. I think in the next era, is going to be beyond personalization. It is going to be about precision, because personalization can be simply you are black, you are white, you are man, you are woman, you are above 30, you are above, below 30. But to me, precision is going to be about understanding every single thing at a molecular level and to be able to precisely do what needs to be done for each individual. That is where the biggest change is going to happen. That's where the data is going to be the key.
But Naveen, you talked about the middleman. Right, you talked about early on. You talked about the technology, and then the middleman, and then the patient. By eliminating the middleman, we're making the technology smarter, and we're giving patients very simple functional choices. I mean, this does not make me into a cardiologist, right? This just tells me thumbs up, thumbs down, AFib, not AFib, abnormality. So again, I don't think that patients will become more empowered, but it's very tricky. That middleman gets pushed to the technology. The magic is in the technology. That's the next 10 years, 100 years that will transform everything. I put my money on the technology and not on the human.
I agree. We are all agreeing on that. The science and the technology is going to be the center, including the data, because data-driven technology and the science is going to be the center. We all agreeing on that. I don't think anybody disagrees. My point is how that will be consumed is going to be the most interesting part. And I really believe that consumer is going to be the consumerization of healthcare is going to happen, whether we like it or not.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I love this discussion. We have tons of questions that are coming in as well. We have limited time, and I do want to put some questions forth and engage with our audiences. Tons of questions. I want to talk about one of the things that somebody's asking Alex has asked this question. Speaking of education on digital health, how do you think that can be incorporated into the current medical undergraduate curriculum in the UK and elsewhere? Perhaps Dr. Shafi can maybe comment on this. How do we incorporate all of this into an undergraduate curriculum? You're an educator as well. Help us understand. Is there hope?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give you an example of what I've been doing and trying to disrupt it. So one of my roles over the last few years, I've been the associate dean at a medical school, helping running curriculums, just redesigning, etc. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I realized that actually the curriculum wasn't fit for practice. The curriculum hasn't really changed for, I'd say, decades. We're producing one-dimensional human beings. They come out in year 1 and you finish at year 5 or 6, and they're very similar in what they've been trained at. It's very old-fashioned. These new doctors of today aren't fit to be doctors of tomorrow. They don't understand the terminology that Naveen and John are throwing around at the moment. They're kind of still practicing traditional methods of medicine because we don't want to change. So what I do at our own medical school, at Bart's Medical School, so Bartholomew's Hospital, has been around since 1123, so almost 900 years. And obviously, we've been slow. It's a medical school that's been progressive over the course of many years. So I introduced a new program called the BARTS X program. And John's actually on faculty there. He teaches every year. I said, look, let's forget this. Let's think about what these doctors of tomorrow should be doing. So we designed a course compulsory for every medical student in the medical school. We teach about entrepreneurship, innovation, digital health. We asked them to think about ideas, to go away with groups of 4 or 5, think about how we create solutions to the problems we have in healthcare. They have mentorship. They come back with ideas. They have crowds. Then they go to a Dragon's Den pitch for their ideas to learn about how to compete for income and money, how to make a business case that's compelling. That's how embedded over the last 4 years our curriculum. We're the first in the world to embed digital health, innovation, entrepreneurship, technology into a curriculum. Now I'm helping other medical schools do much the same thing. But that is a huge, bold move for us. So that's what we do. So BARTS is now one of the very first in the world to do this. Also, remember, after that, you have to continue that. So I'm building digital academies now, not just for the UK, also for Abu Dhabi, and I'm advising the government there to say, how can we transform that working population who are interested, who don't have the knowledge, who have the curiosity, don't have the traction or the necessary resources. Let's create that for them. So I'd say every medical school should be putting this in the curriculum tomorrow. They should also arranging a digital academy for postgraduate training so that it's seamless. It becomes normalized. This is who we are. And that's the only way we produce what I call the digital doctor of tomorrow, but today. And Naveen, I'd love you to speak to our students next year.
I would love to.
Naveen, I have a question for you, and we're all for answering questions. Anuradha is asking that microbiome-based diagnosis is still fuzzy because we do lack expertise in genetic and microbiome counseling, especially a consumer-centric approach. Can Naveen comment on this?
Absolutely. So I think the old approach of microbiome used to be essentially looking at these at a very crude level. So they used to be called based on 16S, right? So you look at these community at a genus level, and really you can't do anything. The science has fundamentally advanced now, not just to genomics, but to metatranscriptomics. That means now we know not only who is there inside you, but what they are actually producing. And once you understand the molecules that are being produced, it becomes extremely actionable. So as I was saying, with Viome, we are able to see that your production of LPS, your production of butyrate, your production of bile acid, your production of every single thing from metabolic pathways and stuff, and oxalate pathways. And based on that, we can tell you exactly what is causing the issue in your gut and how to balance it. And basically, we recommend the right set of food that you should eat and why. And we give you the reason why. And we tell you the other foods you should avoid and why. And same type of thing, we actually now going to be giving you the actual ingredients in a pill form that you can take that are designed for you. That means it's on demand, custom pill just for you based on what you need right now, right? And that thing has never been possible. And to me, you no longer have to guess what is going on because you can see at a biochemical level, at a molecular level, everything that's going on. And it's not just in the gut. You're able to see what's happening inside your gut. How is it changing the inflammation in your body? How is it putting your cellular health? How is your mitochondrial biogenesis? How your mitochondrial energy production? And you're able to look at all of that and start from the top of the tube like your saliva. How your oral microbiome transforming the food. And by the way, this gut microbiome and the oral microbiome, it's not just for the food, it is also for the drugs you take. In many cases now we see that when you take a drug, it sometimes gets metabolized differently in different people, and that's why they have different side effects and different efficacy. So in the case of Parkinson's disease, a drug called levodopa, in several people, the drug gets metabolized by gut microbiome and people have no effect. So to me, the whole idea, it's going to be that everything is going to be precisely and personalized for each individual, whether it is your drug, whether it is your food, or everything you take to be able to balance your body and essentially keep your body in homeostasis and good health.
Thank you, Naveen. John, I have a question for you. Jaydeep is asking, what does the next 1 or 2 decades look like for healthcare professionals? Given man plus machine, what does compensation and lifestyle look for nurses and doctors?
Wow. That's an interesting question because it's very, very broad. So when we talk about medical education, and we talk about, the traditional medical path. And Shafi knows this better than anybody. If I asked him to recite the cranial nerves, or I asked him to talk about the Krebs cycle and 1,6 fructose diphosphate, he'd be able to articulate these things because that's what good students learned. And if I were to take out my smartphone when doing rounds and ask my phone what the differential diagnosis was for right lower quadrant abdominal pain, I would get in trouble. I would be looked at as cheating somehow. So I think that we're going to find what physicians have to learn is going to fundamentally change. So when we talk about e-learning and teaching students in other countries, that's all fine and good. But I think the very nature of what we need to learn is going to evolve to where we get to the point where our bodies become operating systems. It becomes an HOS, a health operating system. And the physician becomes the operator of that system, gets to understand it. And then ultimately the patient becomes the ultimate operator. So I guess as elements of education become less important, I no longer have to memorize the tricarboxylic acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, because I can instantaneously access it on my technology, my smart devices, that the knowledge base changes. So physicians need to learn less, but need to learn more differently. And that goes back to the notion of unlearning. Now, that's complex because ultimately the physician goes along an asymptote, and you could argue that does the physician become obsolete? I'm not going to answer that, but I want to go over to the allied healthcare professionals, particularly the role of nurses, respiratory therapists. Just think of respiratory therapists in the era of COVID. Right, we've known that it is a disease that often attacks the lungs primarily. We know that the use of positive end expiratory pressure versus ventilation may be very, very complicated. What I believe is that the nurse will become augmented. The respiratory therapist will become augmented in the sense that their knowledge base will be mediated by artificial intelligence, and they will become much more powerful players in the healthcare system. The question for me is, how do we integrate the physician into that modality? Because right now, many nurses and even respiratory therapists are operating at the high end of their training level, at the high end of their competence level. What I think that they will do is expand into new vistas where they will be augmented by technology and artificial intelligence. So I think it's very, very interesting. It's a great time to be a nurse, to be a technician, to be a respiratory therapist, because you'll always have the pulmonologist in your pocket. The question is, what do we do with the real pulmonologist?
Thank you, John. We're almost at the end of we've got a few minutes left. I want to take this opportunity and thank all of you, first of all, for being here, spending time with us, almost an hour, helping talk and understand about, what the future of healthcare is. I want to thank all our viewers today on different platforms. Thank you, folks, for being here. Please subscribe to this channel on YouTube so that we can continue to bring such amazing leaders and thinkers to you. I want to do a final rapid, it's not a Q&A, but it's a rapid round of your top 3 recommendations, if you will, to healthcare professionals, to the healthcare industry, to anyone remotely interested in healthcare, a student, doctors, nurses, manufacturers of healthcare equipment. What is it that they should do right now? Maybe top 3 recommendations that you could provide where they could do something within healthcare in the next 2, 5, 10 years. Dr. Shafi Ahmed, let's go with you first.
So the very first thing is to understand the language of innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, understand the landscape we're in, and become exponential thinkers. That's the first thing, transform their minds. Then go figure how we make healthcare more affordable and more accessible using technology as an interface. And that's the kind of thing I think is necessary for everyone to understand the complexities, but how we can overcome some of the hurdles. And also think big. Think, as Naveen has said already, let's think how we change that world and how much impact you can have just individually and collectively.
Thank you, Dr. Shafi. John, let me go over to you. What are your top 3 recommendations to the entire community and industry out there?
Number one is recognize that we live in a data-driven world. That even though emotions are powerful drivers of activity, we are becoming more appropriately connected to data. So I think that, if I were in college, I'd want to study data science, because I think that that's going to be the basis for every decision, from the food we eat to complicated aspects of epidemiology. So we have to embrace the technological nature. It's been said that we have IQs and EQs, right? It's our intellectual quotient, how smart we are. It's our EQ, how empathic we are. I believe that our TQ, our technology quotient, will be an independent determinant of our success, whether it be in the schoolroom or in the operating room. The second thing is I would build a brand. Build your brand. Recognize that in today's world, we all have a soapbox that we can stand on, that we can stand for things, that we can disseminate powerful ideas at the speed of life, instantaneously. Einstein called it spooky. He called it action at a distance. But what happens in Boston happens in Wuhan, happens in San Francisco, happens in London instantly. So we can build our brand. Become the experts that we want to be. If we have a good idea, it's the power of that good idea that becomes resonant in the marketplace. You no longer have to be an academic professor to do that. And finally, connect with people. Google is great. Everybody uses Google. It's a wonderful search engine. But Twitter is the second most search engine. It's not just a platform to say things. It's a platform to look at what people are talking about now. So if I want to know COVID-19, or I want to see what people are talking about remdesivir, I don't go to Google. Google's going to give me nonsense. I go to Twitter and I look at remdesivir and I see what people are talking about now. So those are really the important pillars from my perspective.
Thank you. Naveen, your recommendations to all our viewers, and this video is going to reach many, many more people. What are your recommendations for healthcare providers, students, doctors, nurses, people who are producing equipment and goods? What should we focus on, especially coming out of COVID-19? Because we want to look beyond COVID-19. There's an entire era approaching us of digitization, robotics, virtual reality, data, artificial intelligence. What direction and what wind should we put on our sails?
Well, first of all, we should all be very fortunate that we are living in the most amazing time in the human history. Having said that, the future is brighter than ever. If you are a student, there could not have been a better time, because this is the time all the things that industries that are currently at the top of their world are all going to be disrupted. I would say in the next 10 to 15 years, half of the Fortune 500 companies will not be in a business. So when the Kodak goes out of business, there is another $1 billion company that's going to come about. As every industry is being decimated, the new leaders are going to come. And if you are a student or entrepreneur, just know that you are going to be that next leader, the next entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurs are going to be the next superpowers, solving the problems that could only be solved by the superpowers. Whether it is landing on the moon, living on the moon, is being solved by entrepreneurs. The healthcare is going to be solved by entrepreneurs. That is completely data driven. It's no longer about the opinions. It's no longer about what I think. It is about what data tells you. And now, for the first time, you have access to massive amount of data about the human body, massive amount of the computing power, massive amount of the artificial intelligence to analyze that. So if you're a student, I would say, learn as much about not just data science, but as many exponential technology as possible. That means learn about new, human body, genetic expressions, learn about neuroscience, learn about nanotechnology, because there's going to be a time where you're not going to be looking at the thing body as is. They're going to be the nanobots inside our body, constantly analyzing our body, constantly repairing our body, constantly providing the information about our body. And we're going to look at it in a primitive way that we used to we used to prick our fingers to get the blood out, because constantly going to be analyzed all the time. Your tiles are going to be analyzing your sweat, your weight. Your mirror is going to be analyzing your smart toilets. Are going to be analyzing your urine and a stool all the time. So we're going to be living in this world of technology, the world of sensors, that everything is going to be analyzed by you. And I think you're going to be constantly being given a feedback on what to do, what not to do. And you're going to be essentially, to large extent, going to be driven by artificial intelligence, even though we believe we humans don't want someone to tell us what to do. But the technology is an amazing teacher. You look at Google Maps today. I think I know my area. And Google Maps says take a left turn. I said, no, I know my area. I'm going to take a right turn. I get stuck in the traffic. The next time I listen to the doctor, Google God, and he says left turn, I take a left turn. I don't argue about it. And that's how the technology is. He's going to make a recommendation. Go to this restaurant. You love it. He said, I love that technology. I'm going to use it. And I think we're going to, some extent, the technology is going to be our agent, our companion, and someone we trust. And I think is not going to be evil. Technology itself is not bad. It's the humans that do something bad things with it.
Incredible. I wish I could spend more. We could spend more time with you folks, but I know everybody's busy. You've spent in the last 60 minutes with all our viewers. I do want to thank you for your time, your suggestions, your recommendations, your guidelines. Communicate with people, start learning, start paying attention to what's around you. And as Naveen said, go out there and innovate and push the boundaries, go into entrepreneurship. I am going to bid farewell to all our viewers and panelists. Please hang on for a few minutes. Thank you so much, viewers, for being part of this. Tons and tons of comments. I've been unable to put all of them on the screen, but thank you for being part of this amazing conversation. This is the end of the broadcast, and you can catch this entire recording on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube on my channel. So please consider subscribing to this channel so that we can continue bringing amazing leaders like Dr. Shafi, Naveen, Jain, and John Nosta to you again in the future. And hopefully every week we have a new panel. So thank you so much. And this is the end of the broadcast for all the viewers. Thank you so much.